The ultimate apocalypse revelation, 12 shocking secrets you've never known, watch now. The air crackled with tension as whispers of the end traveled like wildfires through the crowded streets. People were gripped by an unsettling feeling, the kind that sends chills down your spine, as rumors spread about a strange phenomenon taking over the city. Cats were staring at nothing, a peculiar glow hovered above the trees, and shadows seemed to flicker with minds of their own. It wasn't just fear, it was an instinct deep within that screamed something was coming. Something unnerving. At the edge of town, behind a crumbling gas station, there sat an unmarked van. Its windows were tinted so dark they could have been portals to another world. Locals stole glances, hesitant and intrigued. Children dared each other to approach, their small hands trembling, while adults whispered warnings about the last family that vanished without a trace. The atmosphere reeked of secrets, and a sense of urgency gripped the hearts of those passing by. Eyes darted, voices dropped to murmurs, and curiosity mixed with dread, and then there was the old clock tower that hadn't ticked in decades, swinging its hands wildly like a pendulum caught in a storm. Every night at midnight, an inexplicable sound echoed out, a low hum that transformed into a deafening roar, shaking windows and rattling nerves. People claimed it was a warning, a harbinger of doom. Each strike of the clock sent shivers through the core of the community. Just then, a bolt of lightning cracked the sky, casting vivid light against the night, illuminating faces drenched in disbelief. A gasp erupted from the crowd. They were all thinking it, a collective thought vibrating through the air like electric current. What if this was it? What if the end was happening right before their eyes? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. With heartbeats pounding, the crowd began to sway like a single entity, moving in rhythm with the anticipation of the unknown. Questions rose like steam from the pavement. What was the van hiding? How long until another flash of lightning unveiled the truth behind the clock tower? All eyes turned toward the sky, praying for answers but fearing what they might find. Suddenly, an ear-splitting crack fractured the air as the unmarked van door swung open, and a shadowy figure stepped out, cloaked in mystery. Time hung heavy, and a shiver raced down the spine of every onlooker. Who were they? And what secrets were about to unfold? The figure emerged slowly, their features obscured by the heavy darkness of the night. Only the flickering light of the storm cast fleeting shadows across their face, revealing sharp lines and an unsettling calmness that sent the crowd reeling. Gasps echoed, punctuated by whispers of disbelief and curiosity. Who were they? What were they about to reveal? With slow, deliberate steps, the figure moved toward the clock tower. Every eye in the throng followed, breaths held, hearts racing. Had this person come to shed light on the strange occurrences? Or were they the very harbingers of doom that the old tales warned about? A woman in the front clutched her child tightly, her other hand trembling as she reached for her phone, the screen illuminating her panic-stricken face. The air felt thicker now, charged with something electrifying, like the moments before a thunderstorm. The figure raised a gloved hand, quieting the restless crowd as their voice, deep and resonant, cut through the tension. People of this town. Your fears, the shadows that encircle us, they are not mere figments. They are real. Gasps turned into murmurs, fear merging with curiosity. Her heart pounded as she took a step closer, fighting the instinct to turn away. What could possibly be more frightening than what they had already witnessed? You've sensed it, haven't you? The figure continued, drawing closer to the looming clock tower. The energy in the air. The whispers of your own thoughts, they are all clues. Clues to an awakening. A shiver traveled down her spine. Awakening? What did that even mean? Like a curtain drawn back, the clouds parted, allowing the moonlight to flood the area, illuminating the cloaked figure in ethereal brightness. For just a moment, they appeared almost otherworldly, the glow casting long shadows behind them like trails of heated breaths. The time has come for the truth. The truth about this city, about you, and about everything that lives in the cracks between light and darkness. Another crack of thunder rolled, echoing in agreement. Suddenly, the clock tower emitted a sound not the usual, haunting hum but a deep, resonating boom that unsettled the very ground beneath their feet. Each pulse felt like a heartbeat frantic and chaotic. People stumbled back, fear popping into their eyes like bubbles breaking on the surface of water. The figure's voice escalated. This tower was the last sentinel, a guardian of realms, and it wakes with a warning tonight. Just then, an explosion of light erupted from the top of the clock tower. It flickered and danced, twisting into strange, impossible shapes. The crowd craned their necks in a panic, faces thrown into utter turmoil, torn between fascination and dread. Before she could react, the firework display enveloped the tower completely, and a scream pierced through the chaos. A man had collapsed, clutching his chest, his eyes wide in horror. Panic surged through the crowd like wildfire, ripping through the calm. "Get back! Get back!" Someone shouted, voices rising above the crackling sounds of chaos echoing. But the figure stood still, absorbed in the luminous display above. Time seemed to slow as realization dawned upon her. It wasn't just about the strange occurrences. This was the beginning of something monumental, and they were all at the center of it. "Brace yourselves!" the figure shouted, commanding attention amidst the fray. "The worst has yet to come." And with those words, the clock hands began to spin violently, and the shadowy figure smiled, their eyes glimmering with a knowing gleam. What would happen next? The clock was ticking, and time was running out. A hush fell over the crowd, thick enough to choke on. Eyes widened in shock as the clock tower's hands twirled wildly, the hour and minute markers blurring into an eerie vortex. The last legacies of the day melted into the unknown, and with that loss came an overwhelming dread. The figure's smile deepened. "You are not just witnesses. You're participants in a shifting world," they proclaimed, their voice booming against the canvas of fear. "What you think you know, it's all about to change." People recoiled as a low growl echoed from within the tower, a vibrating sound that thrummed deep in their chests. A flicker of shadows bled from the clock face, spiraling to the ground and pooling into ink-like puddles that wriggled and pulsed. Whispers poured from the depths of the darkness, an unholy chorus of warning and beckoning. "Run!" someone shouted amidst the growing chaos. Bodies surged forward, desperate to escape the unfolding horror, but the figure remained rooted, a dark statue against the brilliance above. A mother screamed as she lost hold of her child, the little one's cries absorbed into the cacophony. Hearts raced like thunder in their chests, raw panic igniting every instinct. She lunged forward, grasping the air as if it could somehow bind them back together. "Fear not," the figure called out, sharp eyes scanning through the crowd. "Those who embrace the truth shall find salvation." The tower's magic was never meant to be a curse. It was a safeguard. The words hung in the heavy air, but instead of comforting, they twisted into fresh waves of fears, rippling through the throng like a tidal force. People darted to safety, torn between the horror challenging them and the magnetic pull of the figure's voice. Suddenly, blinding lights burst forth from the clock tower, casting jagged shadows across faces once relaxed now etched with terror. The chaos-amplified screams transformed into panicked cries, the ground shaking under the combined weight of raw human fear. "Stay back!" An elderly man stood tall, brandishing a cane. "You can't trust them." Panic turned their eyes hard, muscles tensed, ready to flee. But the figure remained calm, emanating a surreal energy that enveloped them all. "There is no escape from the truth that you hide from. Embrace it." The figure's voice coiled around the crowd, creating a veneer of control amid carnage. "The town holds its legacy in its core. Unravel it, and you'll witness a new dawn." Amidst the turmoil, the lights began to coalesce into a shape. Twisting wildflowers of energy intertwined like vines igniting the sky, a dazzling glow reflecting the strained faces of those gathered below. She stumbled back, the colors mesmerizing but tainted with horror, a reminder of what lay just beyond their grasp. "Mommy!" The little boy's cry burrowed through the clamor, breaking hearts as parents frantically searched for their children in a panic. Time seemed to unravel as shadows reached for them like hungry hands. "Join me, and we will face this together," the figure commanded, undeterred. Their calmness unsettled more than reassured. Her heart screamed for reason, for normalcy, but chaos was their new reality. Suddenly, the tower emitted a decadent sound, a musical note that plucked at the heartstrings, both beautiful and horrific. It pushed against her, urging her to listen, to surrender to its gravitational pull, but deep down, a voice whispered a warning she couldn't shake off. Yet, as the vortex of shadows throbbed and twisted, a realization hit her hard. Sometimes, confronting darkness required a light one could barely understand. What lay ahead was a precipice. What would be revealed as the hands of time spun madly on? And when the clock struck in unison, would they rise together or fall apart? The crowd surged like a living wave, every individual caught in a cyclone of fear and urgency. Faces were pale, lips trembled, and wide eyes darted frantically. The cacophony of screams melded into a haunting serenade of desperation that clawed at the edges of sanity. "Help! Someone! My baby!" The mother's wails pierced through the darkness, a raw sound that stung the air. As bodies pressed against one another, everyone sought escape, yet no one seemed to know where to run. The bizarre glow from the tower threw deceptive patterns on the cobblestones, making pathways appear and vanish into the shadows. "Stay calm!" shouted a voice from the edge of the horde, a voice tinged with authority trying to slice through the panic. But authority felt hollow against the chaotic pulse of fear thrumming through the throng. In a sudden moment of clarity amid the chaos, she turned her gaze back to the figure at the clock tower. The smile never faltered. This was no mere illusion, no trick of the mind. There was a power radiating from them that ensnared bodies and souls, holding them captive under an unseen grip. Then, without warning, the shadows that had begun to weave around the feet of the onlookers erupted upwards, swirling like a tempest. It was as if the fabric of reality itself was fraying at the edges. Gasps echoed, everyone staggered back, but the figure remained strong, unwavering in the tumult. "Trust in what you cannot see," they bellowed, the ground vibrating beneath their feet. She felt a tremor of dread deep in her gut. Her instincts screamed. "This is wrong," she thought, reflexively pulling away from the pulsing shadows. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught sight of a dark figure moving through the crowd. An old man, wearing a tattered cloak, was moving toward the tower, his face a mask of determination. "What are you doing?" she yelled, but the man ignored her plea, stepping further into the luminescent chaos as if he welcomed the fray. "Fool!" she muttered, heart racing as she tried to reach him. The glowing energy seemed more alive than anything she had ever encountered, and a strange sensation enveloped her. Was it fear? Or was it something else, something darker beckoning her closer? The figure atop the tower intensified their chant, calling out names as if invoking spirits buried deep within the town's history. "This is not your end but your beginning." And with each syllable, she felt the ground shift, a profound invitation woven into their tone. But the crowd wasn't listening. Panic had morphed into blind terror, and they ran like ants whose hill had been disturbed. The earth beneath began to rumble, and with every passing second, the air thickened as the clock's once soothing tick transformed into a rapid, chaotic beat. "This isn't right," she sobbed, feeling the weight of despair clenching around her heart. She scanned the scene for the mother, for the boy, but found only fear-stricken faces. Streaks of lightning flickered in the night, illuminating the swirling shadows. For one horrifying moment, everything froze. Time stood still as a violent crack echoed, shaking the very foundation they stood upon. The clock tower's massive bell began to toll once, twice, thrice, each chime resonating like thunder through her core, then came a voice familiar yet foreboding, an echo from a memory long buried. "They will come for you." It whispered, chilling her to her bone. What choice would she make? The shadows beckoned, asking her to dive deeper into the enigma, but light danced just out of reach. A scream sliced through her thoughts, drawing her attention back to the chaos. Where was that little boy? As the bells rang louder, throbbing against the chaos, she knew the clock was ticking, and soon, it would strike. Would she find her courage to face the unprecedented darkness ahead, or would she be consumed by the very shadows she feared? The clock kept ticking, and her heart raced alongside it. The moment had come, or was it merely the beginning of something far more terrifying? The ground shook violently, splitting cracks into the cobblestones. People stumbled, some falling to their knees, others throwing their arms up in a futile gesture against the encroaching darkness. She felt the vibrations travel through her feet, a reminder that the world was fracturing around them. The air felt charged, heavy with anticipation and a grim kind of energy. "Get away from the tower!" she screamed, her voice barely cutting through the tempest. But the crowd continued to surge toward the luminous figure, spellbound and terrified, their faces twisted in something that looked too much like ecstasy mingled with horror. The old man in the tattered cloak kept moving closer to the tower, determined but oblivious to the dread surrounding him. Her heart raced faster. He can't go any closer." A flicker of movement caught her attention. It was a child slipping through the chaos, eyes wide and shiny with fear. The boy, that little boy. "No. Come back!" she shouted, fighting through the throng. But the waves of terrified people pushed her back, crushing her resolve under their weight. Bolts of lightning sliced through the sky again, illuminating the chaos as though nature itself was in rebellion. In that stark light, she could see the old man raise his hands, palms forward, as if he were greeting a long-lost friend. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice raw. "You don't understand." His eyes tightened, a flicker of recognition passed over his features, like he could sense her fear, or perhaps he had realized the danger just too late. But the figure above paid them no heed, lost in their chant, the resonance of their voice building to a fevered crescendo. Suddenly, the shadows twisted like serpents, lashing out with a mind of their own. They darted toward the gathered crowd, snatching at those who came too close to the tower, leaving behind only frozen screams and gasps. One by one, faces contorted with terror as the shadows swept their victims away, leaving voids where the light once touched. Panic surged anew. "We have to get out!" a woman beside her cried, tugging blindly at her arm. But where to run? The shadows seemed to loom in every direction, trapping them in a snare of darkness, but then there was a glimmer, a spark of light just beyond the rubble. The boy was still there, standing at an opening, frozen in fear but no longer moving toward the tower. She felt a jolt of recognition. He was her only chance. "I'm coming!" With every ounce of strength, she pushed forward, breaking free from the throng. The air thickened with a combination of grit and raw fear, but she could taste the light, the hope she had to reach him. As she stumbled closer, the ground yawned beneath her, the earth pulling at her legs like a malicious force. She had to fight. She would not lose this child to misery, not to this madness. With the last of her strength, she lunged forward, and the world exploded in chaotic brilliance. For a split second, time fractured again. The boy turned toward her, his eyes filled with desperate trust, and in that instant, she saw her own fears reflected back at her, a mirror of doubts and shadows yet to rise. But just then, the clock tower shuddered in an unbearable rattle, the bell tolling with a finality that seemed to silence the very heartbeat of fear itself. And as she reached for the child's trembling hand, the world collapsed around them. What awaited them on the other side? As shadows retreated for a brief moment, an eerie calm settled over the chaos, leaving nothing but the ringing of the clock, echoing, inside her very soul. A faint whisper danced through the air. Your choice will define everything. What choices lay ahead as they stood on the edge of oblivion? Would she hold on to hope or let the darkness consume her? Just as the threat loomed ever closer, the clock struck midnight, and questions echoed louder than ever before. The blinding light enveloped them, pulling her into a world that felt surreal. The heavy vibration ceased, replaced by an unsettling silence. She blinked against the brightness, forcing herself to breathe, her lungs burning with dread. As her eyes adjusted, she realized they were in a twisted version of the space they had just been. They stood inside the clock tower's main chamber. The towering gears of the clock spun with an unnatural hum, glowing a sickly greenish hue. The boy stood next to her, eyes wide with terror, but no sound escaped his lips. "Where are we?" she whispered. But the chamber was empty and her voice echoed like it belonged to someone else. The air felt thick, quivering with something dark and uncertain. She instinctively reached for the boy's hand, squeezing it tightly. "It's going to be okay," she said, more to herself than him. But the words felt hollow. A sudden quaking disrupted the eerie stillness. The gears whirred faster, tightening, turning madly as though responding to an unseen force. Shadows flitted around the edges of the chamber, darting in and out like predator and prey. She could feel their presence, malicious and hungry, just beyond her line of sight. Then, the massive clock face began to crack, spiderwebbing across its surface. From the fractures, a cold wind blew, carrying with it the whispers of lost souls, muffled cries and unintelligible words that clawed at her sanity. "What do they want?" The boy's voice trembled, barely a whisper. She didn't know. She didn't want to know. But her instincts screamed at her to move, to escape this dreadful place. "We have to find a way out. This way." She jerked her head toward a doorway that loomed faintly in the distance, shrouded in shadow. They started toward it, the boy's small hand pulsing with fear in hers. But with every step, the chamber seemed to close in around them. The shadows coiled tighter, and she could hear the echoes of laughter, hollow, derisive, chasing them like wolves. Her heart thudded in her chest, fear pounding against her ribs. "What happens now?" The boy's voice quivered with desperation. She could see the tears welling up in his eyes, reflecting the panicked chaos around them. "It's okay. I promise we'll be fine. We just need to keep moving." Yet, despite her words, she fought to keep her own fear at bay, holding it tightly below the surface. They stumbled forward, every inch feeling like a battleground against the weight of shadows that clung to them. Suddenly, the tower's bell rang out. It was a low, ominous toll that vibrated through them, each reverberation an echo of doom. The boy stopped, tense and trembling, his eyes fixed on the center of the room. "Look!" From the shadowy corner, a figure emerged, a dark silhouette cloaked in darkness yet oddly familiar. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, carrying the weight of ages. As it stepped into the light, her breath caught in her throat. It was the old man from moments before, now transformed, staring at her with eyes that glimmered with ancient knowledge. "Your journey has just begun," he intoned, voice as deep as the shadows. "What do you mean?" she demanded, heart racing with trepidation and confusion. "Each choice defines your path. But time is running out." He lifted a skeletal hand, pointing to the clock, now spinning uncontrollably. With every tick, darkness seeped closer, tightening its coils. "You must decide before the last chime." She felt her chest tighten, the weight of choices bearing down. What were the consequences of their decisions? What lay in the future if they failed? As the clock approached its next toll, the air grew dense, and dread washed over her like cold water. She could almost hear the clock counting down to something unimaginable. What choice would she make? As the hands edged closer to the hour, shadows lurked ever closer, waiting to claim her, waiting to claim them both. Would she be able to choose the right path before everything shattered? The last chime loomed like a specter. What would it bring? The old man's words lingered in the chamber, heavy with an unsettling promise. Each second stretched painfully, the clock's relentless ticking filling the silence with a menacing tempo. The boy's grip on her hand tightened as he recoiled slightly, casting frightened glances at the shadows that seemed to thicken around them. "Make a choice," she mouthed in disbelief. The options felt impossibly distant, swirling within her mind like the chaotic gears around them. She had always thought choices were straightforward simple turning points at crossroads. But looming before her now was a web of possibilities, each one darker than the last. What if we choose wrong? The boy whispered, the quaver in his voice striking her like a cold wind. She hesitated, a jolt of panic racing through her veins. Time was slipping through their fingers faster than she could comprehend. Look! The boy pointed toward the clock face, which now glowed with a blinding intensity. The hands began to slow, pausing just before the hour, and she felt a surge of hope until the shadows shifted and coiled like angry serpents around them. Your decisions are more than mere words, the old man's voice echoed, deep and resonant. Each one carries weight. There are forces at play here that you cannot begin to understand. Enough riddles. She snapped back, frustration bubbling within her as fear clawed at her throat. Just tell us what we need to do. With an eerie smile, he stepped closer. To escape, you must confront your greatest fear. Only then can you break the clock's hold. Her heart plummeted. Confronting fears wasn't just a choice, it was a fight against shadows carved from her own past. Images flashed in her mind: failures, regrets, and moments that stung like fire. Would facing these demons give them the chance to escape, or would it seal their doom? Stay with me, she urged the boy, his eyes wide and pleading. Whatever happens, we face it together. But even as she said it, a sense of doubt gnawed at her. Behind her, shadows swirled and whispered darkly, taunting her resolve. You can't protect him if you can't protect yourself, a voice hissed, slippery and seductive. Instinctively, she drew the boy closer, shielding him from the encroaching darkness. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she had to do. We have to find the truth, to confront whatever is waiting for us. But just as she steeled herself, a sharp sound pierced the air, the next chime of the clock, a deafening clang that reverberated through her bones. The shadows pulsed as if drawing energy from the sound, suffocating the air around them. Now. We have to choose now. She shouted, adrenaline churning her thoughts. Choose what? The boy cried, voice trembling as he darted his gaze between her and the bell. Choose what we're going to face. She answered, desperation weaving through her tone. Fear or defiance? Unknown or suffering? The air thickened with silence as she stood at the edge of the precipice. Each heartbeat echoed the monstrous ticking of the clock, her pulse quickening. The shadows writhed like a heartbroken lover, beckoning her to step back, to flee. But she pushed forward, dragging the boy with her. Then she made her choice. I choose to face my past. She shouted into the void. Instantly, the room erupted in chaos. The shadows thickened, swirling toward her like an angry storm. She felt the presence of her past, dark and suffocating, and she braced herself. Murmurs of doubt crashed over like waves, but she steeled her resolve. Stay close. She urged the boy. As they plunged into the darkness together, she could only hope that confronting her fears wouldn't lead them to the abyss. The clock rattled ominously as the final chime echoed through the chamber, a warning of impending collapse. In this shattered world of shadows and time, one question loomed: would they emerge whole, or would the clock strike upon their destruction? Before she could answer, a figure emerged from the darkness, familiar yet horrifying. Welcome back, it sneered, sending a chill down her spine. And with that, the truth of her past spiraled closer. Do you really think you can escape? The figure crooned, its voice syrupy and mocking, piercing through the chaos like a knife. The shadows rippled at its feet, twisting and churning as if feeding off its dark energy. She felt her legs quiver beneath her, the weight of familiarity pressing down on her chest. No, she whispered instinctively, eyes darting to the boy, whose face was plastered with fear. Stay behind me. But already, he was trembling more than she was, his grip loosening as terror seeped into his bones. The figure stepped closer, and the air thickened, each breath felt like inhaling smoke. You've been here before, it said, the corners of its mouth twisting up in a sinister grin. How many times have you run from your true self? Memories flooded her mind, warm and cold flashes of her past colliding like waves during a storm. She had tried to bury them, shove them into the darkest corners of her soul. But here they stood, refusing to be ignored. Enough! She shouted, fury igniting within her. I'm not afraid of you. Not afraid. The figure laughed, a sound that echoed through the chamber. Then let us see how brave you really are. It stretched a hand towards her, fingers coiling like skeletal branches reaching for sunlight, and instantly, visions overwhelmed her, moments of past mistakes, heartache, and betrayal. Fragments of her deepest fears splattered against the walls of her mind. Suddenly, her vision blurred, and the clock above began to tick louder, each beat a heartbeat of dread. You wanted to face the truth. Very well, it hissed, and with that, the shadows surged forward, consuming her senses. For a heartbeat, she was surrounded by darkness. The world around her was swallowed whole, and the boy's scared voice sounded distant, muffled as if drowned in thick fog. Her heart raced, each thump a reminder of the ticking clock. Time was pressing down, and the only escape was through. Face it. She screamed into the darkness, determination piercing through the despair that clung like spider webs. I won't be your prisoner anymore. The shadows twisted violently, forming distant echoes of her past, the laughter of friends long lost, the scoldings from a parent who never understood, the painful choices that had led to isolation. But now, she had the boy. This time, she wouldn't face it alone. With newfound resolve, she gripped the boy's hand tighter. We can do this together. She insisted, fear colliding with power. We will shine light on the dark. In unison, they took a step forward, pushing through the suffocating void. Suddenly, a blinding light pierced the gloom, illuminating everything with a fierce glow. The shadows recoiled as if burnt, and she saw herself a reflection in a broken mirror, each shard revealing a piece of her fractured soul. Look closely, the figure instructed, its tone now a low whisper, like a snake slithering across rock. She hesitated, but the boy's encouraging nod ignited her courage. It's just a reflection, she told him, though uncertainty gnawed at her heart. But she forced herself to look again, and when she did, what she found made her blood run cold. Each regret, every failure, embodied in her very own expression. What do you see? The figure pressed, its voice now dripping with ominous delight. I see me. She gasped, chilling clarity washing over her. These were not just her fears. They were pieces of her, part and parcel of who she had been and who she needed to be. Would it be enough to conquer them? With her heartbeat echoed in her ears, she remembered the old man's words. The only way out was through. We're going to face this together, she spoke with a breath of conviction. I refuse to let you control me anymore. As the shadows hissed and writhed, the light surged, and she could feel the strength of her defiance rising within her. Was courage powerful enough to destroy shadows born of regret? The boy looked at her, his eyes filled with hope, forging a bond that could shatter chains. What now? He asked, voice steadying as resolve replaced fear. Now, we fight. She declared, summoning every ounce of strength she had. The clock's hands trembled as they closed in for the final strike, but just as they braced for the impact, a shadow from the depths surged forth, a last desperate bid at survival, one so grotesque it made them gasp. Beware what you unleash. The figure screeched, retreating into the depths as the darkness lunged forward, and with that, the battle of their lives began. The darkness swelled, a living entity eager to wrap around her, to swallow her whole. Time dilated as she and the boy stood their ground, the shadows thrashing like a wild storm. Her chest tightened, fear clawing at her throat. But there was no turning back now. Remember, we have each other, she whispered, her voice shaky but resolute. Don't lose faith. The grotesque shadow lunged, tendrils of darkness curling like vipers, reaching out with sinister intent. Panic surged in her veins, but she steeled her resolve. This wasn't just about her, it was for the boy, for all the moments lost in her past that threatened to consume them both. Focus! She shouted, and in that instant, radiant energy pulsed from her core, lighting the way. The shadows recoiled, hissing in protest, revealing glimpses of the boy's terrified face etched with determination. "Now!" she cried, her heart pounding like a drum. Together they surged forward, hands intertwined. The light within them burned, fierce and unwavering. It felt like a beacon against the overwhelming darkness. With every step, memories crashed violently against her mind. She remembered the warmth of laughter, the caress of love, and the sting of betrayal. Each painful shard became fuel. "You can't have us!" she yelled, channeling the power of her past into the radiant glow engulfing them. The shadow drew closer, its form shifting grotesquely, morphing into specters of her past failures, faces of friends she had pushed away, moments of fear she had hidden from. "No more!" she bellowed, the echoes of her voice piercing the near silence like a battle cry. "Remember who you are." The boy shouted too, his voice a lifeline. The light pulsed brighter, illuminating the shadows that lurked, revealing their hideous truths. "Face them," she urged, gripping his hand tighter. "We have to face them together." As if struck by a lightning bolt, the energy exploded between them. The grotesque shadow writhed, twisting violently as the boy's words and her strength fused into a blinding inferno. In that moment, figures began to emerge from the depths. Shadows of the past, yes, but they held no power now. They were just fragments, reminders of who she had been. She understood now these shadows were not her enemies, they were echoes of her growth and pain. "Rise above!" she shouted, feeling the ground pulse beneath their feet. "We are more than our past." The grotesque form lunged again, but this time she stood her ground, a warrior against her own fears. "You don't scare me," she barked, and the shadows roared back, an unholy sound blending anger and despair. With a sudden rush of fierce clarity, she held her ground, her heart shimmering with courage. "All of you!" she shouted defiantly. "You have no power here. I am not your prisoner anymore." With those words, the shadows began to dissolve, slipping away like sand through her fingers. The grotesque form howled in frustration, gasping for breath, trying to hold on to a power that no longer belonged to it. Suddenly, there was a flash of vibrant light cascading from her heart, exploding in brilliance. The boy's eyes went wide, and she felt the warmth of connection surge up her arm, anchoring her. But the shadows retaliated violently, rearing back, a final desperate grasp for control. They coiled around her, fighting against the glow, twisting and snarling, threatening to drag her back into darkness. "We can't give up," the boy shouted, his voice trembling with urgency. "No!" she cried out, feeling her strength falter as shadows clawed at her mind. "We won T. I won T. Let it take me again." As her heartbeat thundered in her ears, she realized this fight wasn't just for survival, it was for every moment that had shaped her, for the boy beside her, and for every dream smothered by doubt. Together, they shouted in unison, and with one final surge of determination, they pushed through the suffocating darkness, breaking free from its grasp, but the figure emerged from the shadows, now more solid and enraged than before. Its voice sliced through the light, deep and mocking. "You think this is over? The truth is far darker than you realize." And as fear gripped her once more, she questioned everything she thought she knew. What was the true nature of this darkness? Was it just the past or something far more sinister lurking within? The battle had just begun. The cacophony of shadows receded in a storm of whispers, swirling around them like lost souls seeking sanctuary. But she and the boy remained resolute, their intertwined hands radiating warmth against the frigid grip of the dark. The figure hovered closer, its familiarity forcing her to confront the raw vulnerabilities she had hidden away for years. "You can't escape what you are," it taunted, drawing nearer, its voice wrapping around her mind like creeping ivy. "No more!" she shouted. Each word erupted from her throat like a wildfire igniting, and the shadows around her pulsed and throbbed as if responding to her stance. "I want to let you define me." The boy's eyes shone with recognition. He understood this moment, understood the importance of standing against their fears. Together. He encouraged, his small voice steadying her resolve. As the room darkened, she breathed deeply, staring straight into the figure's eyes that flickered with a hint of the pain they had shared. A wave of clarity washed over her. "You are a piece of me, I see that now," she said, the words lifting heavy shadows from her shoulders, "but your hold on me ends here." Within that revelation, she felt an eruption of energy coursing through her. The light expanded, bright and blinding, forming a shield against the darkness that sought to snuff out every spark of hope. The time-worn clock on the wall began to chime, each toll resonating with a frequency that churned with rising intensity. "Embrace it." The figure rasped, its voice strained under the pressure of her light. "You will always return to the void if you do not succumb." But she shook her head, grounding herself in the present, the here and now, distinct from the serpentine whispers of the past. "I won T," she yelled. "This is my story now." With that declaration, the light surged, fired by uncontainable determination. The boy glowed with radiant courage beside her, and together they sent forth a beam of light that cut through the shadows like a knife through thick fog. The darkness wailed in despair, convulsing violently under the pressure of their united strength. Each shadow that had once threatened to consume everything now writhed in protest, twisting and recoiling. All that was hidden, all that had gone unacknowledged, began to unravel before her. The grotesque silhouette trembled, its hollow laughter replaced by a desperate rage. "You think this will save you?" it growled. "Yes," she shouted, the power of her voice ricocheting off the chamber walls. "Because I'm finally allowing myself to be free. We choose our own path." With one last push, the light exploded forth, leaving behind a brilliant, cascading glow that illuminated every corner of the chamber. The shadows screamed, lashing out, but it was too late. They evaporated in the brightness, swirling away like autumn leaves carried by the wind. In that moment, the clock hand froze at midnight. The heavy stillness returned, broken only by the gentle echoes of their triumphant breaths. She glanced at the boy, his eyes wide with wonder and relief. "We did it," she whispered, hardly able to believe it. As shadows dwindled into nothingness, a crystallized calm washed over them. The old man's visage returned once again. "You weren't mere participants in a prophecy," he said softly, his voice rich like honey. "You were the architects of your own destinies, and from here, you will forge ahead." The clock's deafening silence welcomed the truth resonating within her. The past was merely a part of her story, a piece of who she was, but never a definition of who she would become. They had faced their fears together, and through that raw power of connection, darkness had been banished to the recesses where it belonged. The exit loomed dimly, inviting and full of promise. She took the boy's hand, their grip confident, and together they stepped across the threshold. The air outside felt different, vibrant, alive, ringing with the cacophony of life reawakening. The city was waking up, unaware of the battle that had just unfolded, the tales they had lived to tell. The clock tower stood behind them, not as a harbinger of doom but as a sentinel of hope, a reminder of the courage they now carried within. And with every breath, she felt lighter, every step forward part of a new beginning. "Where to next?" the boy asked, his voice a melody of curiosity and excitement. "Anywhere," she replied, her heart racing. "Everywhere. Together." With the weight of shadows behind them and the promise of endless horizons ahead, they stepped boldly into the dawn, ready to embrace whatever adventures life would unfold next. And as they walked into the light, she realized they'd emerged not only as survivors but as pioneers of their own stories, forever looking forward, not back. Never again would they let fear dictate their path. You need to subscribe now to witness the ultimate adventures that await. This is the moment to show your support for our channel, so smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. And don't wait even one more second to flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this thrilling conclusion. Be sure to instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who you think need to see this inspiring finale. Your true fandom is what makes our community vibrant.